The rain had been falling heavily all day, the sound of it drumming against the windows echoing through the small town of Sheffield. The streets were nearly empty, save for the occasional pedestrian hurrying to shelter, their faces hidden beneath hooded jackets. The thick fog rolled in, slowly swallowing the town whole, as if the very air was thickening with the weight of something unseen. In the heart of this ghostly atmosphere stood the abandoned factory, its towering structure rising from the mist like a relic from a forgotten time, a monument to decay and whispers of something darker. It had been years since anyone set foot inside, and even longer since the factory had been anything more than a skeleton of rusted metal and shattered windows. Once, the factory had been the lifeblood of Sheffield. A massive industrial complex that churned out goods day and night, providing work for hundreds of men and women who had spent their lives in its shadow. It had been a place of pride, a symbol of progress, until everything changed. One fateful night, there was a massive explosion, one so violent that it shattered the factory's structure, leaving nothing but rubble and twisted steel behind. No one knew exactly what had caused it, but the result was clear. Dozens of workers were killed in the blast, their lives snuffed out in an instant, their screams lost in the flames and debris. The factory, once a symbol of life and prosperity, had become a tomb, a cursed place where death lingered in every corner. The survivors of that night were few, and those who remained were haunted by the memories, their minds fractured by the horror they had witnessed. The factory was quickly abandoned, boarded up, and left to rot. The town had moved on, the wreckage of the factory slowly becoming just another part of the landscape, forgotten by most. But not everyone had forgotten. There were whispers, rumors that the factory was not as empty as it seemed. Some said the spirits of the dead workers still roamed the halls, their bodies lost to the fire but their souls trapped in the ruins, forever bound to the place where they had perished. Others claimed they had seen lights flickering in the windows late at night, heard strange noises coming from within, and glimpsed figures moving through the shadows. The more time passed, the more these stories grew, until the factory became something of a legend, a place so cursed that even the bravest souls hesitated to approach it. But of course, there were always those who didn't believe in ghosts, in curses, or in anything supernatural. They saw the factory as nothing more than an abandoned building, a relic of the past that had no more power than any other. Among them was a young man named David. David was a journalist, a thrill-seeker at heart, and he had heard all the stories about the abandoned factory. The idea of uncovering the truth behind the rumors intrigued him. So, armed with a camera and his curiosity, he set out one cold, foggy evening to investigate the factory for himself. As he approached the factory, the weight of the place seemed to press down on him, the air growing colder, heavier, with each step. The factory loomed in front of him, its broken windows and decaying walls casting long shadows that seemed to reach for him. The gates, rusted and twisted, hung open like the jaws of a giant beast, inviting him inside. He hesitated for only a moment, then pushed forward, his footsteps crunching on the gravel as he made his way toward the entrance. The sound of the rain became muted as he stepped through the gates, the fog swirling around his feet like a living thing. Inside, the factory was eerily silent, the only sound the faint creaking of the old metal beams above him. His flashlight swept across the walls, illuminating old machinery that had been left to rot, covered in dust and grime. The floors were cracked, littered with debris, and the air smelled of decay, of something long forgotten. David's heart raced, but his excitement overpowered the creeping feeling of unease that settled in his chest. He had come to find the truth, to uncover the secrets of the factory, and he was determined to do just that. As he explored the building, David's footsteps echoed through the hollow space, each sound amplified in the stillness. He made his way deeper into the heart of the factory, passing broken windows, shattered glass, and old metal machinery that seemed to groan under the weight of time. The air grew colder with each step, the temperature dropping sharply, as though the factory itself was trying to warn him away. David couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching him, waiting just beyond the reach of his flashlight. He tried to shake it off, telling himself it was just his imagination. But then, he heard it, a faint scraping noise, like something dragging across the floor. David froze, his breath catching in his throat. He turned quickly, his flashlight darting across the room, but there was nothing there, nothing to explain the sound. He chalked it up to the wind, the old building settling, and continued on his way. But the feeling of being watched only grew stronger. The shadows seemed to stretch and shift in the corners of his vision, and the temperature continued to drop, his breath now visible in the air in front of him. He reached a large open room, a cavernous space filled with old machinery and rusted pipes. The air in here was thick, as though the building itself was holding its breath, waiting for something. David moved cautiously, his flashlight scanning the room for any signs of life, but the room was empty. Or at least, it seemed empty. That was when he saw it. At the far end of the room, near an old control panel, there was a shadow. A dark figure, standing perfectly still. David's heart skipped a beat, and he felt his blood run cold. The figure didn't move, didn't make a sound, but David could feel its presence. It was watching him. He took a hesitant step forward, his eyes locked on the figure, his hand tightening around the camera. Then, suddenly, the figure moved. It wasn't a man. It wasn't human. It was a shape, a silhouette, but its form was wrong, distorted, as if it were a thing made of shadows, something not meant to exist. David stumbled back, his mind racing for an explanation, but before he could react, the figure lunged toward him, its arms reaching out, stretching impossibly long, its face a blur of darkness and jagged teeth. David screamed, dropping the camera as he turned to run. His feet slipped on the wet floor, the sound of his heart pounding in his chest drowned out by the rush of air as he sprinted through the darkened factory. The shadows seemed to close in around him, reaching out like hands, pulling him back, dragging him toward the very place where the figure had emerged. He could feel the cold breath on his neck, could hear the whispers, the voices of the lost workers, the souls trapped within the factory's walls. But just as he thought he was going to be caught, he reached the door, and with a final burst of strength, he threw it open, stumbling into the night air, gasping for breath. The factory loomed behind him, silent once again, as if nothing had happened. But David knew better. He had seen it. He had felt it. The curse of the abandoned factory in Sheffield was real, and he had barely escaped with his life. As he ran away, the fog swallowed him whole, and the factory stood behind him, waiting for the next soul to wander into its grasp, to uncover the secrets that lay within its crumbling walls. But some secrets were never meant to be uncovered, and some places were better left undisturbed. And the abandoned factory in Sheffield remained, as it always had, a dark, silent witness to the horrors of the past, its secrets locked away in the shadows, waiting. Waiting for the next curious soul to come too close, to hear the whispers, to feel the cold hands reaching for them, pulling them into the darkness.